What is up, people? I don't know how many of y'all are going to show up this afternoon. This is kind of an impromptu stream, but that's kind of the point of doing this, right? We're just trying to give some people some opportunity. Maybe you're free in the afternoon. I have a crazy idea. Y'all get to be part of it. And hopefully, we can teach people some things with all the different stuff going on here. So I think that started a little weird. I think I got to talking before I went live on YouTube there. But the idea here for the stream is I want to try something different because I think a lot of times in comments or in messages in Discord, like people ask, why don't you include this card? Or why doesn't this card get played more? Or is this even viable? Or whatever, right? So I think there's a discussion to be had around certain cards. And even just saying, hey, why is this card not played more? Or why did you not include it in this list? So I figured I would make a stream and we can talk about those types of things. Whether it's individual decks or it's just individual cards, and or maybe it's decks and why certain cards don't make the cut or whatever. I think there's a lot to be learned and a lot to discuss, especially with Eldraine, because there's a lot of new stuff that we still haven't messed with yet, right? That still has kind of gone largely unexplored. So I figured if somebody has a pet card, you can bring it up in the chat. If you have a question about a particular deck, you can put that in the chat. And then we will just talk about all the different options that are available and why certain things are good or bad. Let me hop over though to the other screen here. I have a ton of different windows up right now just in case I needed them for the stream. But just as an idea, let me see if I can find a deck that I've done recently to like I think I had this one here, right? The Naya Adventures list. This is one that went up today, actually. If you haven't watched this video, I really recommend you should. I think this deck is actually really cool. It was a lot of fun. It was really versatile. It made use of a bunch of different cards, which is super sweet. And y'all didn't seem to like the video and didn't watch it, so I don't know what happened. I thought this deck was super fun. A version of this deck also did really well recently and won a big tournament online. I think it went like 10-0. Not this same version, but something similar. So, I mean, the concept has now been proven to work. So, if you want to check it out, I'd recommend go check it out and possibly play it. It's actually pretty sweet. Let's see what we got here. So, Krovac says, my favorite card in Standard right now is Painful Quandary. Not really a mystery as to why it doesn't see play, though. Yeah, see, that is a real problem, right? A card like that is a good example. I have that as just like my position card. But let me put in Painful Quandary, which is spelled very weird. Oh, I always get it wrong. Why do I get it wrong every time? Here we go. Is that not it? Because I did have it right. I'm just typoed fat fingered a thing. There we go. So this card is a good example of something that looks really powerful on the surface, but it only can kind of go into one type of deck. And don't get me wrong, we've played it in a deck last season and I think 2 seasons ago. So I'll probably try it again at some point this season. I'll just do a heavy discard list where we play this. But it's also a victim of circumstance as well, right? Because a lot of the removal you're seeing in a lot of decks happens to be stuff like ossification or any of the white enchantments that are exiling stuff or whatever. We're starting to see more enchantments be played, so you're occasionally just running into decks packing a little more enchantment removal, which in turn makes this less good, right? Because you have to get to a situation where your opponent has fewer cards in hand so you can get the benefit of this ability, but then also play it on turn 5, 6, 7 when you have the mana, and then hope it stays out there and does stuff. And that's if they're not just playing some hyper aggro deck and just like F it. Right? You're gonna have less life than me. I'm gonna keep attacking anyway. But it's a neat card. I think while it's nice, though, it's just you have to completely build around it in some ways to make it worthwhile. Because if you don't, it just doesn't feel like it's worth anything. And the worst case scenario is you play it against something like a control deck or whatever that's drawing cards and doing this other stuff that they get to the point where they're discarding some land or something and they just don't care, right? So it not only does it need the deck, it needs the right circumstance in the game state. And it's crazy when you lose with this out because you feel like you shouldn't lose, but you still do. And being real, there's a lot of stuff that's 5 and 6 mana now that have just a bigger impact on the game state, whether in almost every color, really, which is kind of crazy to say. But there's just good stuff. Once you get to 4, 5, 6 mana, you almost need something that can have an impact right then or the next turn, or at least put enough pressure on your opponent that you force an answer from them, right? Like, I don't know if this particularly does that. So that's a little bit of a tough one. Daniel, who is a YouTube member, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you so much for that. Honestly, if y'all like, if you subscribe to people on Twitch, YouTube memberships are basically the same thing here on YouTube. So I appreciate those that have. Daniel says, my dumb favorite pet card is Skyfisher Spider. Gives reach, potential life gain, removal. I don't think that card's necessarily dumb. I think the main issue with Skyfisher Spider, really, because like stat wise, it's kind of average, right? It's a 3/3 with reach for 4. That's not terrible. It's not great. It does have an ETB ability, so if you have something else you're willing to sacrifice or give up, you could destroy a permanent, which is pretty cool. And then if it dies, there's a chance you get extra life. Now, the downside to the life gain part, which is kind of what you're seeing with different cards right now, is just so much removal exiles. So I've had games where I've had like 8 to 10 things dealt with, and none of them went to the graveyard, right? They're either in play under an enchantment, or they got exiled to like the White March, or they got exiled to what else was exiling stuff recently? But you know what I'm saying, basically. Oh, well, to the sweepers for sure, because we have 2 sweepers that exile things, which is crazy. So yeah, it's a tough thing to just not have things go to the graveyard right now. We have a lot of cards that exile stuff. Hell, even now you could play the Inn, which exiles multiple copies. Like, it feels like we're getting that every set, right? So you almost have to assume the life gain's not going to happen, except in matchups against maybe like, I don't know, mono red or something, right? Where they don't even have a way to remove stuff from your graveyard. Hell, there's even the black green land now actually remove cards from graveyard as well. So it's tough. It's tough. But this card does have uses. I think the issue here on this one is just raw power, right? When you're comparing it to all the stuff Golgari has access to, it's hard to make room for this card because you have to give up something to get the removal, or you could just play like Terra Sunder, which if you're needing to remove an artifact or enchantment is cheaper. If you want to move any other permanent, costs the same cost, right? And it's instant speed. So that also hurts stuff, right? And then at 4, you also have Shieldred, obviously. At 3, you've got stuff like Glissa, the werewolf, things like that just are already 3/3s with huge upside, right? You can get a 3/3 where you can gain life and drain your opponent every turn. You can get a 3/3 that your opponent can't hardly block. That's going to either kill an enchantment or you get to draw a card, right? And that's at 3 mana, like not at 4, not at 4 mana. So it's tough right now. Like and it's only going to get worse for some cards as we extend standard, right? Because we're standard at some point is going to be 12 plus sets deep, right? At some point, there's just not going to be room for some of these cards to be played. And it's not that they're going to be terrible. It's just that when there's that many cards to pick from, something's just not going to get played. It's kind of like I tell people, right? Somebody had to graduate last at doctorate college, right? There's some doctor somewhere that graduated bottom of his class, still a quality doctor, right? There are just a lot of other doctors, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what this is going to be like. It's playable, it's fine, it has upside, it does some things you want to do, but except for in the exact right metagame, or possibly the exact right deck, maybe you're playing something with tokens, maybe you're playing stuff that's putting a bunch of things in the graveyard anyway, then it has a higher percentage chance of being played. But if you're just playing like I don't know, mid-rangey Golgari thing, you probably don't play this one, sadly. What do we got here? Super Fast Tortoise. That's actually a fun name. Cool little icon there, too. My favorite card is both good and bad, but or can be either. It's the results that are quite unexpected. Well, we all probably have some card we've liked over time that overperformed or underperformed. Yeah, if you have a card that is your pet card that you're wondering why people don't play it, or is it possibly better than people think, or should it be going to certain lists, or if you know a deck list of mine that didn't play a card that you wanted and you have a question, now's the time to put it in here. That's what we're covering on this stream. I don't even know. I would say Bothian. Is that how we say that? Or Boethian? I don't know. While it isn't my favorite card, I see Mosswood Dreadknight being very popular, and I don't understand why, given that you also have to play green instead of sticking with just black for the underdog. That is a pretty good question. And this isn't about just playing one color. Like if you're playing the knight, you're already committing to playing green black, right? Is mono black fine? Yes. But there is also some stuff that green does that black doesn't. At least not does well, namely getting rid of artifacts and enchantments, right? So if you are playing some green, like we talked about, like Terra Sunders and things like that, this does give you that option. Also, this is kind of doing, in a way, what the underdog is doing, but you get to keep the creature in play each turn after getting the card, right? Whereas, like, you play the underdog, you lose the 2 life, you attack, you get a card, and the creature's not on the battlefield. Now, you can still pay 4 mana, but you get to keep the 3/2, and it only costs you 1 life to get the card, right? So, by adding another color, you actually got a second underdog, because you can still play both. You got a second underdog that's actually a little bit better. Now, you don't get the haste, right? But the trade-off is you also get trample. And if this dies or goes to the graveyard, obviously, you can get it back multiple times. So I don't think this is a matter of this card being worse at all. It's almost just a different style of underdog. But if you're looking at just general stats for what you get, they're both 3/2s for 2. One has trample, one doesn't. When the other one dies, you can play it out of the graveyard for the cost of 2 life to get a haste creature and get a card. This one, for 1 life, you get that same 1 card, and then you get a 3/2 trampler. It doesn't have to go back to the graveyard, right? So they're functionally different. While generally they look similar, they do play very differently. And again, because of the world we're in now with Eldraine and triggers and things caring about stuff being played from exile or whatever, right? Like this could be used with stuff like, I don't know, well, if you're playing a multicolor deck, there's stuff like we played today, like Pia that cares about adventures being played, or cards that care about cards that have adventure being in your graveyard, or any of that other stuff, right? Or there's times just being able to get the card for 2 mana is nice. Whereas you can't do that with underdog, right? You might be light on mana, or maybe you want to leave up a say go for the throat or something on that turn. So you're like, okay, well, I'll just draw the card and wait. And then next turn, I go ahead and play the knight, right? Whereas you can't do that if you have the underdog. You kind of have to commit to spending all your mana right then. So the card is very good. It seems very pedestrian on the surface, but it is actually very, very good. Follow-up says, I guess what irks me is that if you have to use adventure mode, if you want to keep it on death, whereas underdog is always available. Yeah, that's fine though. I think you're just committing to that, right? The decks you're playing them in are not going to be the same. Now, you can still just play mono black. There's nothing wrong with that. That deck is still playable, still fine. But you're not going to get the versatility you get from having the green in the deck, right? Because by adding green, like we're saying, you get Dreadknight, you get Glissa, you get Terra Sunder, right? There's a whole list of cards you unlock that can fill some gaps that you wouldn't necessarily have if you played just mono black. So something to consider. I don't think this is bad at all. And like I said, the versatility of not having to give up 2 life and not having to give up 4 mana right then. It's now again, you're right. You don't necessarily have access to it all the time if you don't use the sorcery, right? But most of the time, you're going to use the sorcery. And if you're in a situation where you don't want to use the sorcery and the other card's just better, it's either desperation anyway, and rarely would the underdog have helped you, or you're in such a good enough position that you're like, well, F that 3/2. I'm going to go ahead and just play this better card. And that's fine too, because you're getting close to ending the game. But yeah, if you like mono black and you like the underdog, keep playing the underdog. Keep playing mono black. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nobody's saying you got to play the dreadknight. It's outright better than the other card. Like, it depends on the build. Personally, I would be more inclined to play Golgari than I would to play mono black right now, just because of the options you have access to. Just the cards are so strong and so good together, and you get a lot of just, even if you want to go crazy late game options and play like Big Glissa or something, right? Like, there's a bunch of things you can do and help a lot of situations that you don't get with just mono black. Because one of the things I've noticed with mono black in a lot of my games is a lot of times if you get out in front or you can survive a like Gix's command, a lot of times those games become easy. You know, if they don't get all the removal perfectly early or whatever, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to slam the shieldred, and then you have a shieldred answer, like, it feels like a lot of times we just win those. And you've probably seen it on the videos we played. And there's decks that even in some of the online Magic the Gathering tournaments, the results we've been seeing have been beating the mono black decks. Not to say those decks suck. There's still going to be some that finish top 8 or whatever, but they are beatable. I think people just get in their heads, just like, oh, they had this removal, they had their removal, I can't beat this. But even now, little cards like Royal Treatment have made a big difference, right? Not just because you can protect a creature, but because you're giving a creature +1/+1. So now stuff becomes even harder to block, right? There's just a lot of little things that have tweaked up the numbers that have actually made playing Golgari, I feel like, a little bit better. But that's a personal decision. Obviously, you like mono black, keep rolling with it. It's got a lot of quality options, and I don't think you're going to be upset with it. What else do we got here? Another one in this category is Staff of Completion, but Ashiok might help it. Oh, man, Staff of Completion. This is something. Oh, boy, this card. I'm going to be real with you. I've tried playing this card in a few different decks because I figured it's a cool card. People would like to see it in action. But honestly, unless I'm already playing something that gains a lot of life, I really didn't want this card. And really because adding the mana wasn't great at 3 mana, even if I had ways to gain life. Proliferate really didn't matter that much. I mean, sometimes if you had like a planeswalker out or something, it's kind of a cool extra option. Drawing a card is sweet, but before life, that's such a huge chunk. And then you can untap and do it again. I don't know if this is ever going to have a place in 60 card Magic. Just because you almost need a lot of setup to make sure you have enough life. Actually, it's weird because you need partly a setup to have enough life, but you also need a setup that can take advantage of the things this staff does, right? Is there a reason I want to destroy one of my own permanents? Probably not, right? So then the 1 life doesn't even matter. So it's like gaining a mana is always cool. So that could be convenient if I have some stuff that's 4, 5, 6 mana. That's not bad. But then proliferate probably doesn't do much because I'm focusing more on gaining life and doing something with the staff, right? So really, I'm mostly using it for mana and drawing a card. And if we're going to do that, there's just a bunch of other ways to do that while you're gaining life. Hell, there's even a white enchantment that just, if your life total is higher than it was the turn before, you get to draw a card, right? So I think that's the real issue. Does it have uses? Like, yeah, but they're very slim. Very slim, I think, is the problem on something like this. I don't think, like, again, I think if I built around it and I was playing a cool life gain deck or something, maybe in Commander or whatever, then I would throw this in because, you have forever. Hell, and you start with 40 life, right? So getting to draw a bonus card or whatever is pretty sweet. Ramping your mana up to cost of 2 life is fine. I think there's a lot of situations where that works. I just don't see where, like, I'm even thinking about against mono white, mono red, even to some extent mono black, the Golgari list. Like, honestly, I think I can't figure out what deck wants this where it would be better in any of the matchups those decks have problems with. I think that's my issue. Well, I'm like thinking it through here. And honestly, that's been part of my experience even trying to play it. Most of the time I drew it, it was like the worst card in my hand all the time. Unless the game was already a blowout and I didn't care about giving up 4 life to get another card. But at that point, it could almost be any other card that just has an impact on the game, right? If it wasn't the staff, it could have just, in theory, been the card I would have drawn anyway, and I don't have to pay the 4 life for it. You know what I mean? Like I could just make it something else and it would have been fine. So yeah, not huge for me. Not huge for me. It's a tough one. Krovak says, I played in my Hidetsugu combo deck for the ramp and sack abilities. That's fair. At least that's one deck where you want to sacrifice a thing. I mean, but again, I don't even know if that's necessary, right? You can already be playing other just quality removal to buy you the time to get your combo and then just use one of your own removal cards on your own guy, right? Does it need to be the staff? Like, probably not. That's the thing. Like, can it work? Yes. Is it the best option for that? I don't know if that's true, but I at least get it. You know what I mean? Like, if, like we said, this is one of those cards that you have to be using at least two of the options regularly to make it worth it. At least you're using the two cheap options, right? Because if you're using the other two, it gets pretty costly pretty quick. Let's see what other suggestions do people have. Daniel says Ashiok changes the cost structure to exiling cards. It does. It's a little bit pricey. Ashiok hasn't been as dominant as I think a lot of people thought it was going to immediately. Buthian says, I have seen a deck with 5 mana Ashiok that uses staff in a toxic build, but I wouldn't say that's going to. Yeah. That's still 3 life, which is risky for that style of deck, right? Because you're going to take a lot of damage early setting that up. But yeah, I mean, if you can make it work and you get the life, that makes sense. I mean, proliferate with toxic is one of the best things you can do with proliferate, for sure. Let's see. Staff of completion has done well in commander. Yeah, that's what I figured. It's definitely gonna be more of a commander hit. Havoc says, "Hey, I just got into Magic. Love your vids. Learning a lot. Thank you so much. You know, we get a lot of new people on the channel. Actually, hey, here's something else. By the way, I just found this out this week. If you're a new player, and maybe I should make a video on this or something. Make a short. I'll probably put this in a short later this week, but or next week because the end of the week is today. If you go into Arena and you complete the tutorials and you do the color challenges, just do them all. So you learn everything, get all the basics of the colors, how magic works. You will get a link and a pop up, and it takes you to a site where you put in your information, and they will send you a 2-player starter set, like Paper Magic, the latest starter set. They just send it to you with 2 full decks. I didn't know that was a thing. I only found out because I was in another group and somebody was asking, like, hey, is this a scam? Like, somebody asking for my information, whatever. And I was like, oh, I didn't know they do that. But it was legit. It's a real link. It checks out. So, yeah, if you haven't done that and you're new, and I don't know, maybe it works for existing players. I just know for sure the 2 people I know who did it were new players. I don't know if it works for everybody else or not because I haven't done the color challenges myself to find out. But that's pretty cool, right? Because we've talked a lot about how do you bridge the gap between Arena and Paper or whatever. Like, that's such a cool way to do it. It's just, hey, here's all the basics. You learned everything. If you want to try to play with somebody or go to a local store, here's some cards to start with. So pretty sweet. And the decks are actually pretty balanced against each other. If you're new players playing decks, it's actually not bad. So that's actually a cool thing. For those of you that are new to the chat that just joined us, what we're doing today is put your pet card, a card you're wondering why it's underplayed, maybe a deck list I had that you thought a card should have been in there, whatever, post that in the chat, and we're going to talk about it. And we're discussing why cards are good, bad, better, or worse. Maybe they're underplayed. Maybe there's spots for them. And just kind of, because we haven't really done that. You don't get a lot of content that's that, right? We put out deck lists and stuff and like, hey, this is the thing, and this is how the deck works. But there's not a lot of time to just say, like, why is this card not played? Why does this card not fit in a deck list? You know? What else do we have? Havoc says, I actually am playing the color challenges at the moment. Till I really understand every card and having to read them, definitely look it up. Yeah, totally worth it. Feral Encounter and Undiscovered Grandstand are just a bad. Oh, you know what? When I started, for those you don't know, I have 2 podcasts. I have Color of Magic, which is mine and a friend of mine that we do. And then I co-host on Magic Mics. Magic Mics, this is one of the cards we talked about in the preview season. And it's a tough one because it's worded. Now, I had a judge say that this card was worded this way to minimize confusion as far as like I guess the resolution of the card on top of the library. But realistically, if this was an instant, I would like this card so much more. Because the problem you have, or if it had the text until the end of your next turn, like a lot of the new red cards do, right? Because the problem here is if you try to use this card, say on turn 4, right? And you reveal something that costs 3 or more mana, there's a real chance, like, well, okay, you fought something, but then you can't use the thing you want to off the top of your library. You're just wasting a card. And that's really unfortunate because nobody wants to waste a card. So you're almost better off still just playing a card like Bushwhack, where you can still have the fight option, or if you're light on mana, you can go search for a land, right? And you get some versatility out of it. Because honestly, it's tough even looking at the artwork, right? Because you get this idea of like the big bad wolf ambushed Red Riding Hood or whatever's going on in the picture, right? Actually, I think that's the red green legendary chick, Ruby, right? But she's getting ambushed by this wolf, but it's at sorcery speed, right? That's really what kills this card is that it's not an instant because we have so many other fight effects that are instant or just deal damage and have an upside, right? You get a roll token, you get a treasure, you get whatever, right? Those are all better. Hell, one of them you get an extra +1/+1 and fight something, right? Than just straight up fighting and possibly losing a card. Now, if you had this card and you drew it on like turn, say 5 or 6, then it's actually probably really good because you get to fight something and you're very likely to find something on top of your library you can just cast. So that's actually really good. But I almost feel like this card started out differently in design. And as it went through development, it got reined in for one reason or another. Maybe it was more cards and they reduced the number of cards. Or maybe it was only 3 cards, but then they increased it to 5 since they were making it a sorcery or something. I feel like they moved some levers around on this, and ultimately we ended up with a rare that nobody really plays. Like, even when I've had it played against me, multiple times the opponents basically use it as a fight spell, and then nothing happened. And it's just like, ugh. And the worst part is, it's not like you can get anything off the top. It has to be a creature. So you can't just like, let's say I'm on turn 4, maybe turn 5, or maybe I missed a land drop. I can't use it and then take a land from exile and put it into play, right? I have to try to find a playable thing I can cast. So it's very restrictive compared to other cards doing similar things, unfortunately. It is double green, so it is pretty cheap, but you also are committing very hard to green, so it's not even like you could just put this in a deck you're splashing green into. So yeah, I think this is one, it's just overdeveloped and we ended up in a bad spot. Like, this is the type of card that if we could put it, if they were to do an alchemy update and made it an instant, I'd be very curious to see how much better the card is. Because at instant speed, I feel like the card changes entirely and becomes so much better. Well, instant speed and gets the until the end of your next turn text, right? Those two things I think would turn this card better. If it has to stay a sorcery, at least give me a full turn cycle to set up that other card I could play, right? That would be even better. But as it is, I just don't think that's going to cut it, sadly. What else do we got here? Defense the Tower. I don't even remember that card, which is not good. Is it Defend the Tower, maybe? All right, whatever it is, I can't find it. I'm like searching all the terms. Maybe that's not a real thing. I don't know. Yeah, I got nothing. All right. Well, I'm gonna move to the next one till we figure out what that is. Really, the card Nahiri the Unforgiving, but I've never seen anyone play it. Is that the Planeswalker? Oh no, wait. We had a deck just like a month ago. If this is the card I'm thinking. Oh no. We played the regular. We didn't play the Planeswalker. Yeah, this is not great. This is another card I've wasted probably like 6 hours or so on. And I wish I had that time back. This card just doesn't it's like it reads like it should be decent, but it just doesn't hit. And it may be one of those ones that's just never destined to be good in standard, right? Because the plus one is until your next turn, up to one target creature attacks a player each combat, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, if it's just me, then I'm just making a creature attack. Like, what am I doing? Making your mana creature attack? Like, that alone tells you it just doesn't feel like a standard level card, right? It's just like, so your first plus one's not great. Discard a card, draw a card is almost always useful in something, right? So I think that's fine. But then the 0 is you exile target creature or equipment card from your graveyard and it has to be mana value less than the loyalty that's on here. So if you've played it and you +1 to draw a discard and your opponent attacks it or whatever and it goes to 3, well, then now you have to find something that's actually 4 or less. And even then, you only get it for a turn because you get a copy, then the copy gets exiled. So if you had some way to like copy the token or something that triggered on something entering the battlefield, and maybe something that cares about haste or whatever, like, sure, but man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for very little return on this card. And it just feels like you could just do better. Like even now, there's so many things that even just care about equipment or whatever that trying to build those, you can just play with better cards. Because there's going to be a lot of times that Nahiri is not even great because it's one of the few planeswalkers that doesn't even have a way to defend itself, right? It doesn't make a token, doesn't reduce the power of a thing, doesn't kill or return a creature. Like it's make something attack me or draw a discard. That's it. I mean, it does start with a pile of loyalty, so that helps, but that's really all it's got going for it. So yeah, this is another one. And I hate cards like this because I almost feel like, again, it probably got overdeveloped. There was probably something that came up in playtesting or whatever that was really, really strong with some version of this. Then it got nerfed, so that thing didn't dominate, but then now it does almost nothing. You know, and it's not the first time. And I'm not blaming R&D. Like this is just a thing that happens. I mean, I've worked on other card games and that stuff just happens, right? You rein a card in, but then it just loses a lot of its oomph, if you want to call it that, for a lot of other stuff. So yeah, tough one. Jugan. Yeah, okay. Jugan's an interesting one because I've actually put Jugan into a couple of decks. Oh, that's the wrong Jugan. That's the old Jugan. This is the new Jugan. Jugan defends the temple. The problem for me on this card was simply speed. Because getting the monk that adds a counter, or I mean adds mana, doesn't matter as much when we already have so many quality mana creatures, right? We even added one. We got the Bramble Familiar or whatever with this set. So now you have Bramble Familiar, you've got the Taxidermist, you've got Loam Speaker, the Scrap Gorger. There's a bunch, right? So getting a 1/1 that, and not only that, you could pay 3 to get a 1/1 that just dies to cut down or whatever. Anyway, so you're not really getting much. The backside seems really cool, but the reality is you almost never use the ability unless you're already way ahead. The only times it's worked out for me is either I'm already way ahead or it's just a crazy stalemate. So then like we have a million lands. Like every creature I play, I'm like, this one gets 5 counters, this one gets 6 counters, right? Which is fine. It helps you break a stalemate. But if this was just a better card, would you even be in that stalemate, right? For 3 mana, you could play this, or you could play what's his name? The 4/5. Oh, why am I forgetting his name? Pulokranos. That's what I was thinking of. This guy. You could play this for 3 mana, right? And this automatically is so much better. It's a bigger threat. It's harder to deal with. It has upside on the backside if the game goes long. Like so many things better by just playing this card over playing that, right? So you're in a situation where it's not even that Jugan defends the temple's bad. It's just everything else is better. It's this whole thing we're talking about earlier, right? Somebody's graduating last in doctor school, in medical school. I don't want to say doctor school. That sounds so stupid. Medical school. You know what I'm saying? But like, still a fine card. It's just getting overshadowed by other stuff. And the question also becomes, what deck wants that, right? Because the backside, you're playing a creature deck, right? So every time a creature comes in, you're spinning counters. But like, does a creature deck want to be going to turns 8, 9, 10, where that's actually really good? Probably not, right? So if it's just a better threat, maybe you end the game before you even get to where you have to worry about that. What else do we got here? Y'all are coming in with the comments. Everybody's active here. This is really, really cool. Also, thanks for swinging by. This was kind of an impromptu stream I put together like an hour ago, and y'all showed up. So great. Let's see. Barely see 4 mana Kaito in ladder. Personally feels better than 3 mana one. Oh, okay. Let's talk about that. That's a good comparison here. All right. So with this Kaito, whenever you deal combat damage, you can return one of your creatures or return a creature to your owner's hand. If you do, you get to activate loyalty abilities of Kaito an extra time. So that's actually kind of nice. +1, up to 1 target creature can attack or block. 0 to just straight up draw a card, which is obviously always nice. And then -2, you make a 2/2 drone artifact creature. And when it leaves the battlefield, loses 2 life or you gain 2 life. Or lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. Is it better than the 3 mana one? That is, I would say, very deck dependent. Because the 3 mana one does have the ability to guarantee you an attacker effectively, right? It can't be blocked. Your opponent has to use removal on it. And it protects itself for a turn. Now, this one does do that. You can make a 2/2 and make a blocker, which is fine. But then you're down to 1 loyalty, which then makes you susceptible to a lot of other things. But I don't even know if it's a matter of if this is better than the other Kaito. I think it's a matter of what else is your deck doing, possibly at 4 mana. Because we do see a lot of decks that are playing Shieldred, Sorin, right? Things like that you have to kind of look at and go like, would I rather have a Kaito than those cards? Like, I don't know, right? Because even if you're comparing it to Sorin, the token you make for Sorin is technically better because it can block a flyer. It has 3 toughness. Sorin's going to be left with 2 loyalty instead of 1. And Sorin gets to add a loyalty for drawing a card. Now, at the cost of life, potentially. But Kaito can get you a card without costing your life, but you're still going to be stuck at that 1 loyalty or whatever, right? So you're still susceptible to it dying to a lot of things the next turn. I think this is a good card, though. I mean, I've seen a few people play it. I think if I was already playing some type of Esper, Sultai type Super Friends deck, I would include 1 or 2. I think it's more than fine. Don't have any complaints for it. I don't know if I like it better, though, than the other one. Mostly, because 3 mana to 4 mana is a very key part of your deck building lately in Standard. And there's more decks, I think, that are going to be okay playing the 3 mana one than they are playing the 4 mana one. Because I could even see situations where an Esper aggro deck with, Rafines and whatnot would possibly play the 3 mana one. I don't think they'd play the 4 mana one. Especially since Rafine's already going through a bunch of cards or whatever anyway. That's just a way to guarantee you just get to draw more, whatever, every turn, right? So yeah, I don't know. This one, it's not a bad card though. This is one that definitely is playable. I can see some situations where people still play it. Getting to trigger something twice, if you have something you're willing to return and maybe has an ETB trigger as well, is kind of cool. So like, don't hate that. It's interesting. It's a close one, but I still think the 3 mana one's better. But this one's definitely still playable compared to a lot of the cards we talked about before. This one definitely can find its way into some deck lists, and maybe even more as this season drags on, I think. Let's see what else we got here. Krovak says it's not in Standard and in an awful rare, but Force Fruition is a build around. That's true. It's not Standard. We're mostly keeping this as Standard. However, those of you that are just joining, if you have a card that you want to talk about, preferably in Standard, that you think is a fun pet card, wondering why more people don't play it, Maybe you think a card is overplayed and you're wondering why. Maybe I've had deck lists that haven't included certain cards and you have questions. Now's the time to put that in chat. That's what this whole stream is about. As let's talk about basically underappreciated, underloved, or maybe over exposed cards and why they are or whatever. But looking at this card here, we've got Force Fruition. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player draws 7 cards. This is just a matter of being too slow. I mean, if you trick it into play, it's great, but the other question is, when do you want this, right? Versus other things you could get that are possibly just game enders or have devastating effects. But this card isn't bad. I've also seen this card cause a lot of chaos in Commander when somebody's already playing, what is it, Nekusar, I think, the commander that whenever you draw cards, you take a point, or when an opponent draws a card, they take a point of life. So, like, all right, play a thing, draw cards, and then things just get kind of crazy. So, yeah, so I could see that being a thing. But, yeah, definitely want to build around it. But usually you're trying to trick it into play if you're going to play it in 60 cards, and there's probably better stuff that you could be putting into play. Katose, that's another one that I see pop up on the ladder every once in a while. And I think I've only tried to put it into one deck. And I think it's really just the cost for what we're getting. Because for the most part, you're getting a 4/4 for 5. Like, if your opponent already has the right card available and you can get a copy of something really useful, it's nice. But otherwise, it's really just kind of a 4/4 for 5 that you're often not getting much. And I mean, you can get anything, which is nice. I mean, you can't get a basic land, but that's still pretty good for what you're getting. And you are removing other copies that they would have access to. So that's worth considering as well. But then, unless it's like a devastatingly powerful card, I don't know, right? Like, is it worth it to pay 5 mana for the ability to maybe get something good from your opponent's yard, right? Because here's the other problem too. We talked about this kind of to start the stream, is that a lot of removal and a lot of cards are just removing stuff from the game or from the graveyard. So a lot of times Katose probably won't even have that many quality options. Like, maybe if you're already milling your opponent and then you get to, like, get your pick, like, then maybe I want a Katose. But for most of the Dimir decks I've seen, it makes sense that Katose doesn't make the cut, right? Because at 4 and 5 mana, what would you rather be doing? Playing Shieldrids, playing Planeswalkers, just bigger, better stuff that has more high impact to start just putting the game away right then, right? Because a lot of times with Katose, you're still investing mana on this turn and you're investing mana next turn to possibly not even get a card that's as good as Katose is. So it's a neat card, but I get why people don't play it. I think this is almost a victim of just the nature of standard, or actually just a lot of formats as a whole. But again, in Commander, if this popped up, even though you're only getting shot at one thing, there's a lot of times like high value things in people's graveyards, right? Because everybody's dealing with everybody's big cards. So I don't know. But yeah, Katose doesn't surprise me. I feel like I can say this honestly, that the games I remember, and it's not many, but the few I remember losing to my opponent having Katose, they were already way ahead, right? I don't remember a game where I've lost to a Katose because they drew it, and then it's like, oh, they get to play this thing out of my yard and I can't deal with it. That's usually not the case. But again, if maybe you were playing some type of mill deck or something along with the other card, like you could look at their top 2 and play it or whatever, like maybe making that part of the theme and this fits all that, like probably. I mean, it's still a 4/4 body, so it's not like it's chopped liver. But yeah, I get why I don't see more of this one. By the way, I have this deck list up on screen. It's actually really, really good. Y'all should go watch my video I have up from today. Like, genuinely. I mean, obviously I want the views, but like the deck is actually really good. Like, I'm surprised more people aren't into this. And versions of this are already going around, and one of them actually went 10-0 at a recent Magic Online tournament. So it's actually solid. I mean, it's a little tricky. You gotta learn some things to play it, but if you get it down, it's actually pretty good. But yeah, I put the link there if y'all want to check out that video as well. But yeah, let's get into the next thing. Let's see. That was the Katose. Bodhin says, I tried. Jugan defends the temple. Oh man, y'all are really coming in with stuff now. Everybody's hopping in. Love to see it. You tried Jugan defend the temple in green white enchantments, but even that yeah, it's just not worth it there because you have better things now. I mean, even at 3 mana. Let's see here. Havoc says, was thinking of learning a green deck first, and my question is, are big minions good in this game, like Giganosaurus, for example, or are smaller ones better? That's more of just how you build the deck, right? You can go low to the ground and fast and just protect your little guys, or you could spend a bunch of mana or do fun things to trick big things into play and ramp up your mana. Like, yes, is the answer. Like, there's a lot of ways you can do it. And even throughout the season, you'll see me play a mono green that maybe is all about the biggest ramp monsters or whatever. And then I'll play just a regular up the curve, play something on 1, on 2, on 3, on 4, and then try to protect it and kill your opponent, right? So multiple things are viable, which is a good thing that you have options. Nashi Moon's Legacy doesn't seem to have much play in standard. Could probably be some silly stuff. We had a deck list. Oh, when was that? Let me go back and look real quick because I'm pretty sure we played one. Did Nashi make our list from like early August? Was that the last time? Maybe. Oh boy, I don't even know. It's the only list I've had with it in there. And I don't even remember if it made the final cut. I'm gonna go check it right now because I'm thinking in my head it might not. It might have got left on the cutting room floor. Which is sad if it did, because this was the only shot I was gonna play it. Yeah, it's not my final list. So yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Like I was gonna try to direct you to something, but I'm like, nope, not even that. Yeah, that was my one shot. I feel like, yeah, it wouldn't have been in the other list either. Okay. So yeah, let's look up Nashi here. Moon's Legacy. There's a few things working against this card. Again, what we're getting for the cost, because there's just a lot of good stuff, right? It's a 3/4 with Ward and Menace, which is actually pretty nice. So stat-wise, it's actually a reasonable card. Happens to be a rat, but really rats are mono black or black red for the most part. You're not really playing green or blue. So that's a hold up. And then the other problem it has is it only really lets you play legends, because we're going to assume you're not going to have enough rats in this 3-color deck or whatever to make it worth it. You're playing it with legends, right? That's not the greatest thing. And again, this comes back to, unless your deck's putting a lot of things in the graveyard, we know that so many things are getting exiled from the graveyard as it is, right? And the world we're in now, it's not even like the cards are stretching to remove stuff from the graveyard, right? You have like the werewolf, you got like Agatha's Soul Cauldron. There's the other thing I've been playing lately, the scavengers, right? Like that's a good card that's removing stuff from graveyards. Right? And not counting all the things that are just exiling, so stuff never goes to the graveyard. So Nashi already doesn't have many quality targets a lot of the time. And you're probably only targeting legends and not rats because of the colors that this card is. I think if this card had been red, black, something, if you needed it to be 3 colors, I'm not sure it needed to be, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because the color, they want to justify it being Menace and Ward and playing something out of the graveyard, I guess. But if it was red, black, something, then there would at least be a reasonable chance that you could splash this into a Rats deck and then replay like your Kuramonics to find more rats and put them in your hand, right? Or get back the new guy that like just keeps making a rat token every turn and just be a nuisance to your opponent. And this would be a card that perfectly fits that. But it unfortunately doesn't fit the decks that it's trying to fit into. And even if you're just saying, well, the 3 mana slot in these legendary decks, you start asking yourself, like, do you want this over Adeline? Do you want this over Rafine? You know what I mean? Like, these are cards that all have great upside that you're going to have to say, like, I want to play this over those in a legendary heavy deck. probably not what you're looking for. They're just things that are more high impact, sadly. So it's a neat card. It's not awful. Like I said, it's a 3/4 for 3 with menace and ward. So stat wise, it is great. But that's kind of where it stops. You just have a 3/4 thing with a couple of cool abilities on it. If there's a world where that's okay and that fits your curve in those colors and it makes sense, then go for it. And maybe you happen to also be playing, I don't know, Glissa. Like, I'm trying to think of other legends you might squeeze into the deck that are good. So you could play them out of the graveyard. Sure. I don't have a problem with that. But just in general, yeah, there's a reason we don't see a lot of this card, sadly. What else do we got here? My favorite personal, I'm assuming that says personal deck right now, is Breach with Katosa at the end and Stonebrain. That's a lot going on. I'm just gonna leave that where it is. What about Rin and Realmbreaker? I don't see that. You know, Rin and Realmbreaker's an interesting case actually, because it actually does show up in some lists, and I've played it in some, but it mostly has to be lists where you're usually able to take advantage. Either one where you're green with at least 3 other colors, so just having your lands be able to tap for anything helps, or you're taking advantage of stuff in the graveyard, right? Because you're milling some stuff and you might be able to do something with that. The last ability, like, kind of works and sort of matters, but I think I've only triggered that once. So I don't know how relevant it is. I will tell you, though, I have a deck list coming up. Man, I'm actually trying to post decks ahead of time because I'm going to Vegas in a week. So it might show up on Wednesday. I'm probably lying to you right now. Sometime Wednesday or Thursday. That does play Red and Realmbreaker. I don't think this card's bad at all. I think people got overhyped when it came out because they were like, oh man, it's a 3-mana Planeswalker and 3-mana Planeswalkers are good. It's an okay 3-mana Planeswalker. Like, because it doesn't untap a land, it really is like a 4-mana Planeswalker. Right? Now, if I played like a 1-mana creature and 2-mana creature and an opponent hadn't dealt with it, then yeah, I guess I can go ahead and play Rin and Realmbreaker and there's +1 it and just risk it, right? Not a big deal. But if there's really nothing else out, you're probably waiting to play this on turn 4, then make sure you have a 3/3 untapped. But that's fine, right? Or, like I said, you're playing something that already takes advantage of the graveyard. So if you're milling stuff or you're playing like a self-mill deck, because there's a lot of that is probably viable now, this fits that. Because not only do you get to put stuff in the graveyard, you also can get a permanent back, right? So it's doing a few things. I don't think this card's terrible. I just think it's not like, it's from that era where Wizards seem to be trying some things with Planeswalkers where they just don't fit every deck, right? They have to go into specific decks that are doing things that this cares about, which I kind of like, right? Because it was a little weird and not weird, but like annoying when we had, I don't know, like Lolth. If you were playing black, that was in every black deck, right? Even now, it's like Wandering Emperor's in almost every white deck. Even the white aggro decks are playing Wandering Emperor, right? So we don't necessarily want that. So I do like this, that I won't say it's necessarily a build around, but it needs to fit a theme of what you're doing. But if you are, it's kind of a cool card. So yeah, this one, I don't have a problem with either. This is another one that people mention. I think the case about this one isn't that it's bad. It's just not seeing as much play because there's not a pile of decks that fit what it's doing, if that makes sense. Like, if you're playing a deck, like we're saying, a mill deck or a multicolor deck, whatever, this fits totally fine. But you're not going to just put this in Gruul aggro, in mono green, even like a Super Friends deck with green probably doesn't play this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not a thing. So it's not bad, but you just got to have a spot for it. And I'm okay with that. At least it still gets used. Let's see. I've been intrigued by C double. I just can't think of a deck to utilize it. C double. I had a deck, and it never made it to video, that I was experimenting with last season, at the end of last season, with this card. And I don't think that, I think the issue is this isn't a card you need to necessarily build around. I think it's a card you kind of just play. And if you have stuff that you can take advantage of, then it's a bonus, right? If trying to think like if you have some things that are killing stuff or can bounce things or whatever, then playing like one or two C double isn't awful because later in the game you can double it up and copy it, obviously. If you're playing something that already makes tokens, that's not bad, right? Or if the environment moves to something that's making a lot of tokens, then you can copy that. Because it doesn't say token creature you control, just create a token that's a copy of target creature. So if there's something that becomes a thing, then maybe. But it's not. This is one again. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's just it's incidental. It's situational. And when you have cards like that, sometimes you just want to play the thing that's more consistent, right? You could play C double, or you could play one of the 4 mana things that let you basically draw 2 cards. Which one are you going to want more often? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what you're faced with. Like you could play C double or a pile of other things, and you kind of have to have that real discussion of like, how many times am I going to care about copying a spell or copying a token? Now, if you're playing deck, like I said, that just happens to have enough quality things that are worth copying, then yeah, play one copy, see what's up. If you want to play your fun of, just go to 61 and shove one of these in the deck, right? But otherwise, I'm probably skipping on this one. This one, I'm going to give a thumbs down to. It's a neat card, but not good enough that you want to squeeze it into a lot of decks. All right, let's see what else we got here. Man, y'all are coming with the cards. Should I keep building around Hopeless Nightmare? I do not even remember. Oh, wait. I think I know what this card is. Yeah, this card. This card's actually good. Like, I don't know if I would build around it, but the card's just decent. I mean, it lets you scry, your opponent discards. It's a 1 mana card that your opponent discards, they lose 2 life, and then later on you get to scry 2. And you can scry 2 at instant speed. So it's not even like you have to spend mana on your turn. So you can leave mana up to remove something and then just scry and just get a better draw, right? This card's fine. There's literally nothing to complain about this card. Now, would I play it in every single black deck I play? Not necessarily. But if I'm playing something that's fairly aggressive, it could fit. If I'm playing something that's discard heavy, it can fit. And yeah, it's just useful. Hell, even if I'm playing like some type of gain and drain type deck, this fits that too. So yeah, I don't have a problem with this card. This card's totally reasonable. Like this is probably the best card we've talked about today, honestly. Kaya Geist Hunter. Ooh, yeah. This is another one that showed up in a list or two for me, and that was about it. And then I never considered the card again. Again, I think it was those cases where I went, oh, a 3-mana Planeswalker. But it's a 3-mana Planeswalker that just doesn't do much most of the time. Right? It's like creatures you control get Death Touch. So you have to already have other creatures out. So it's not really a 3-mana Planeswalker. Right? You get to put a +1/+1 on a thing, which is pretty cool. But again, you have to have stuff already surviving and hope they don't kill it after you put the counter on it. You really didn't gain anything. -2 is fine, but again, you have to have cards that are already making tokens for the turn. And even at that, do you want to waste the ability to possibly make a whole bunch of tokens with their actual like ultimate ability? So yeah, the problem with this is like, and what's sad is I think I even have an Orzhov tokens list. Do I have it already up? It might be coming in a couple of days. This is what happens when I get too far ahead on my videos I'm posting. Let's see. No, we just did the Orzhov tokens. That was yesterday's, actually. They went up. And y'all actually like that one, it looked like. But yeah, Kaya could go into that list, but it's feels objectively worse than every other card I would play, right? It's not any better than Lord Skitter, because Lord Skitter is just making a creature every turn and removing something from graveyards. It's not going to be better than Wedding Announcement at 3 mana, right? It's not going to be better than Kuromonix, which is possibly putting another. Well, I don't have Kuromonix in that. I have a rat deck that's coming, which is what I was thinking about that. But pretty much every other 3 mana thing I want to play, this probably isn't going to overtake that. And I don't even know if this Planeswalker would be good enough if it made like a 1/1 spirit. or 2/1/1 spirits. Actually, make 2/1/1 spirits for -2. That'd be pretty sweet. And then it'd probably see a lot more play. But the fact that it just doesn't do anything really on its own, like this is a planeswalker that literally does nothing on its own. Like it doesn't draw you cards, it doesn't kill a creature, it doesn't tap a thing. It literally, unless you already have other things happening, this planeswalker does nothing. Right? You can give Death Touch and not put a counter on a thing, just a +1, but that doesn't do anything, right? If you don't have anything already making tokens, -2 doesn't do anything. And obviously, you have to have done a lot of things in the game already for -6 to matter. So yeah, that's really the issue with Kaya. It's like when you compare all the other planeswalkers, they all do something actively. Like even where we're saying Renin 7 or whatever, which we talked about a little while ago. That card, at the very least, you still put stuff in the graveyard and put a permanent in your hand, right? So you're still +1 card, right? It still did something. Whereas Kaya literally can have multiple turns where it does nothing. And that's why it's worse than pretty much everything else you're going to play in the 3-mana slot. All right, let's see what else we got. Brandon Howe, if you want to see this, it'll all be on the YouTubes usually about 5 minutes after we're done, so you can catch all that there as well. Pour one out for Giganosaurus. Yeah, Giganosaurus, not great. All right, let's see what we got here. Any consensus on Mosswood Dreadknight? Many say it's Pillar Golgari decks, but I can't seem to get the most value out of it. It's just a good card. We talked about this card earlier. It's just good. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a good card. Even if you're not maximizing value, it's still better than most 2-mana things you're going to play. It's a 3/2 for 2 with trample that has upside of possibly you getting to draw a card, and it just doesn't die forever. Unless they exile it, which there is a lot of exile stuff. But the time they're not exiling it, or you're just blocking against other creature decks or whatever, you just get to have continual value. Like, there's no question the card is a good card. I get it that you may not be able to maximize it, and maybe you don't get to bring it back to life more than once or whatever. Like, that's still better than most of the 2-mana things you have already would have played in its slot. Like, even if you only get to reuse it once every other game, it's still going to be better than most of the other 2-mana things you would play in the decks that it goes in. James White says, hey. Where else are we? Let's see. Rin is seeing play now with Slowgurks, Tortoise, Restless Vinestock. Yeah, that makes sense that it goes into that type of deck. No question. More legends to slot in. Not to mention you could possibly do some hilarious stuff using spell copiers and legendary spells. Oh, if you want to go down that road. Yeah, but that feels like more commandery than standardy to me. This is funny. I want to see double with 3 blind mice copy any creature 3 times. Let me tell you this. I have a deck that's coming that's blue-white tokens. And I thought about C double in that deck, and it didn't even make it to the testing phase. And the deck was still great. So that's tells you how specific, I think, how much you need to be able to take advantage of stuff with your C double. That wasn't even enough, because, and it was mostly because I wasn't going to have a ton of mana to want to use it all to copy like a 3-mana enchantment or spell that's on the stack. And like, I just didn't have enough spots where it was going to be useful enough. So, I mean, just copying a thing is fine, but it wouldn't have been great. So yeah, didn't even make the cut there. But the deck does have 3 blind mice in it. That is in 2 days, I believe I have that queued up for. Yeah, tomorrow. Actually, if y'all could do me a favor, go watch the Adventures deck. I'm telling you, it's a good deck. If you already have the cards, you'll want to play it. It's really, really good. Tomorrow, Rats. The following day is Azorius tokens. And I don't know what I'm going to do for the next day, but I have a really cool deck the day after that. So lots of fun stuff coming down the pipe still. All right, let's see if we can catch up some other cards here. Let's see. Favorite card is Glitz of Sunslayer. Oh, yeah, that's a good card. Like, nothing, no arguments there. We all know Glitz is a good card. Why did Leer plus Hullbreaker disappear? This is kind of a good question, right? I think this is an example of how a deck can dominate within a format, and then as the format shifts, the deck no longer has any power, right? That's hullbreaker belly. Every time you cast a spell, you get to either return the spell to the opponent's hand, or you can bounce a permanent. But Leer works with it. Oh my gosh, how many things have? Oh, because Cavalier has Leer in the name. That's funny. But Leer actually plays stuff out of the graveyard, which then lets you trigger the hullbreaker that many more times, right? And kind of can create a situation that's hard for your opponent to come back from. But I think these cards are almost a victim of circumstance. There's a lot more quality removal, right? I mean, yeah, so many decks are even playing, like we said before, like ossification and that stuff, right? Every deck seems to have some level of decent removal. Hell, even the green decks have decent fight spells that are 1 and 2 mana, some of them at instant speed, right? So that already puts a lot of pressure on keeping a Leer out. And then you have the follow-up issue of, like we talked about before, a lot more cards are removing stuff from the graveyard. So between those two things, you have to also be protecting your Leer and your hullbreaker, which usually doesn't come out to like turn 10 or whatever. But then also hope there's stuff in the graveyard you can even play that are worthwhile. Because otherwise, now you have Leer not really doing much of anything. And you have to worry about all that while you're trying to slow the opponent down, right? With whatever your choice of removal, bounce spells, whatever it happens to be. And I just think it's a matter of, you can't keep up with the fast decks as easy anymore. The stuff removing stuff from the graveyard's a problem. Removal being better is a problem. And if you were going to play blue heavy, you might as well try just going with the mono blue deck, right? Playing more counters, more defensible creatures, and creatures that are flying over the top to kill your opponent. So beyond just struggling to still be solid, it's fallen out of favor because it's just a better blue deck. All right. Next card, Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh. Man, y'all are coming with some stuff. Ooh, I think I have Tezzeret in a list right now, too, that y'all haven't seen. Yeah, I have literally like piles and piles of it. By the way, for those who are just joining the stream, we're talking about cards that trying to say, is a card better or worse? Should people be playing it, playing less of it? Why is it not included in lists? Also, if you see the Naya Adventures list on the counter on the screen, oh my goodness, it's one of those days. You should go watch it. It's actually a really good video. I found out earlier today there's some versions of this deck that went 10-0 in one of the big Magic online tournaments as well. So now, admitted, those are best of 3, but this was really good in best of 1. So if you're looking to play something a little different and you like adventures, I'm going to leave you the link here in chat again, so y'all can go check that out. All right, Tezzeret. Still good and worth building a deck around. I don't think you build around Tezzeret. I don't think there's many 4-mana cards you build around right now in Standard. However, I will say that I think if you're playing something already artifact heavy or has a reasonable artifact component, Tezzeret's totally fine. I think one of the lists I recently had it in is one of the it was an artifact heavy deck with vehicles, because I was playing the one that you can make the big 10-10 or whatever, right? I think that list played Tezzeret because it was able to dig for cards and it just turned some of our junk into 4/4s, which is more than fine. So yeah, if you're playing something blue with lots of artifacts, makes sense. Go ahead and play Tezzeret. You're probably not harming anything. And the card's still good. And don't forget, it does also make your activations cheaper. So that's pretty nice. There's also some combo-y things people are doing right now with Tezzeret because it reduces the cost. And it's each turn. So if you want to crack food on your opponent's turn or whatever, like that's a real thing you can do too. So yeah, it's still a fine card. I don't know if I'd say it's great or it's bad. It's just another one that, because it's based around artifacts, you just got to have the right things to make it worthwhile. How viable do you think a tapper deck is with 3-mana white enchantment and other synergies? That's a whole deck, so we're not going to really get into that right now. But if you had a specific card, you can give me the card name and we'll talk about that. Says I've played against Pia Adventures enough times. Yeah, the deck's good. It's good. I'm telling you. If y'all haven't checked it out, it's surprisingly good. Let's see. I've actually had fun with the blue Virtue from the set. It's turned my enchantment decks into Bant decks, and doubling every enchantment trigger is fun. Yeah, that makes sense. I could see something like that. Speaking of three blind mice, have you seen the deck in it with Tameo completed Sage for infinite saga tokens. No, but I'm not surprised somebody did it, but I wouldn't probably like that's the type of stuff that's difficult to make videos about, right? Because it's cool that it's needed, it does the thing, but I would never expect anybody to actually want to play that deck. Like, it feels like it wouldn't consistently enough do the thing. Now, if you found a way to consistently do it, thumbs up. Absolutely go for it. But I wouldn't think that's the case. And that's the thing. So, like, and I've even built some decks and played them on video where I've told y'all outright in the strategy section of just like, do not play this on the ladder, right? This is probably a play queue at best if you just want to do some fun things. And that's what that feels like it falls under. But I could be wrong. You know, if somebody's making it work consistently, great. That might actually be a thing. I don't know. But it doesn't feel like it would be. Let's see what else we got here. Arcad and Prime. Is that two people or is that like two businesses? I'm curious. You've been pumping out the coolest videos. Love your list a lot. I was about to watch Adventures video, then I saw you were live. Yeah, that is one of the things that's really fun about YouTube lives. Just kind of as an aside here, that you don't get on Twitch is that while I'm live, if you're watching one of my videos, it gives you the little thing that just says, "Oh, this person's live," so you can just go watch them, which is just a cool added bonus. So yeah, I really like doing that, which is why I'm trying to stream on both kind of regularly every week now. Um, my favorite card is Urtai. Urtai's a fine card though. We already know Urtai's decent. Let's see. One of my favorite cards that could be neat with all the ETB stuff is Lagrella the Magpie. Um, Lagrella, I've only really played it, and I think I've had like some was it Bant tokens where I found a way to squeeze one or two in. And then when I've been playing just heavy legendary stuff, because you want all the legendary creatures with what's his name? The big 5 mana dude. The Wooburg one. But that at least gives me a creature that's also a legendary that can remove stuff. So in there it makes sense, but I haven't really wanted it anywhere else. It's largely most of the time going to be inferior to a brutal Cathar, now inferior to the Fox, Werefox, or whatever. So I think if you have a specific list that the other parts of it matter as far as its size and being legendary or whatever, cool. But if not, you're probably better off playing one of the other ones. There's just more upside to them, I think. Yeah, Decadent Dragon we know is a fine card. Hilda's Crown, I already did a short about. The thing is though, I think that card's much better in Commander than in 60 card. But if you're playing obviously playing like the tap down deck and whatever, then yeah, you'll want to play Hilda's Crown for sure. Let's see. I was high on Black Sun's Twilight when it first got spoiled, but I haven't gotten a chance to try it. I don't see it any successful as what happened. Black Sun just has the issue of getting outclassed, I think. Because I don't think it's a bad card. And we still see it sometimes in the more control style mono black decks tend to be the ones that play this. Occasionally, I see it in control or Zob list. If they lean a little more, like they lean more black, but white's mostly for like sweepers, I'll see it in there too. But that's about it. The reason being, though, is there's just other quality removal, right? Like you can kill a thing with this, but the investment is just so much more. Whereas you have Go for the Throat, Infernal Grasp, Shieldred's Edicts, like cut down, spell, right? There's hell now we have the end, right? They just straight up exile stuff. And it doesn't matter the size, right? It could be a 5/5 or a 6/6. You can still hit it for 4 mana. So yeah, while this isn't terrible, it's just not outstanding. And most recently, even the reanimator decks I've played, where this seems like it would make reasonable sense to have this as a removal and then maybe get something out of the graveyard. Realistically, you just don't have room. You're just playing a bunch of other stuff to either ramp up or do your trickery to get your things into play, or you're just playing other better removal to where you don't have to waste a full turn on one card like this to get rid of a single creature. At least that's been my experience. Card's still not bad. I don't think it's bad. I see it every once in a while, but not that often. And usually, I think the problem here is, and now that I'm like even more thinking about it, is that you would also want to have at least be it a mid-rangey deck to get, or have some creature that is critical to your deck so you can keep getting it back into play, right? If you don't have that, then you just have a pile of other removal that's better. Even the March can be better because you can just disc or exile stuff in a pinch if you're just down to 1 or 2 mana. Arcad Prime says, you are Arcad and your wife is Prime. Okay, that makes sense. That's what I felt about Lich Knight's Conquest. Too inconsistent most of the time. I'd rather just play Black Virtue for Graveyard Recursion. I actually played a deck recently with the Conquest, and I actually liked the Conquest more. I had more copies of Conquest than I had of the Virtue, mostly because of the cost. Like that's really the issue. And depending on what you have in the graveyard, like I was getting out the Cavalry, so you're almost ending the game right when you get it. Whereas if you are relying on the Virtue, you don't even get the thing from the Virtue till the next upkeep. So you're taking that whole 7 mana investment, and then you still have to wait a turn cycle to get to do the thing you want to do. Whereas if you're playing Conquest, not only can you just get something back, you can also get multiple things back, which is a big deal. Especially if those things have haste or ETB triggers or anything else that goes along with them. It's actually a big difference. But I do really, really like Virtue, and I'll play the Black Virtue in way more decks than I'm going to play the Conquest. If I'm playing a Reanimator deck, assuming I have ways to make like treasure, or I'm playing some artifact creatures or whatever, then I'm probably playing Conquest. But if it's not that type of deck, I'm probably playing Virtue. A deck called Channel Rowan really craps me out. Yeah, we're not talking about decks. We're talking about individual cards today, but there's a bunch of different versions of that. Basically, just using Cauldron, make one of your things something that can tap and untap itself for a bunch of mana, and then just burn your opponent out. But there's a lot of ways to deal with those decks. I don't think they'll be all that dominant. It's kind of like for 2 days we had those, whatever, the 5 mana invasion or the 5 color invasion that like flips a bunch of stuff in the graveyard, then you remove the counters and you get something else out of the graveyard. Those were all the rage, it felt like, for like 2 days, and then I'm already seeing way less of them. Just as people realize what they do, and you're like, okay, well, just remove this from the graveyard. I'll just save a counter for this one thing. Or I'll just like bum rush you and you don't do anything about it, right? So we beat 2 of them, I think, in the last video, and I was just like, all right. I mean, there was still a risk that they could have top decked the card they needed, but we still managed to win. They're good decks, though, once they pop off, for sure. Let's see. Any other cards? Ooh, let's see. Rowan, Scion of War with Unctus provides a lot of mana. That's interesting. Now, you are having to play an additional color, which I think is a little bit of a problem. I don't know. Because, like, for those you don't know, this is Rowan. Rowan's a 4/2 for 3, which is already reasonable with Menace. And then your spells cost less black or red mana, or your black and red spells cost X less mana, equal to the amount of life you already lost this turn. And what they're talking about here is with Unctus, you can pay Phyrexian blue mana, so 2 life, to then turn something into a blue artifact, so your stuff is already 2 less, and then do what you need to do. The problem here, though, is you're talking about a card that's double blue, right? And a card that's double red, or double, it's 2 different colors. It's black and red, right? So now you have to have 3 colors available, 2 of which need to be blue by turn 3. Well, really by turn 4, because that's the other thing, because this is a 3 mana and a 3 mana. And you're also not attacking with Rowan because you have to tap Rowan to use her ability. So you need the next thing to be pretty, like, I'm assuming you're playing Rowan on 3, so you'll be able to tap Rowan on 4, so it won't be summoning sick. So we're already having to play Rowan, hope Rowan survives, which is already an issue. Then you get Unctus, right? We're just assuming you have the right lands, multicolor lands, whatever. So this works. You get Unctus. You pay the 2 life to turn, I'm assuming, Rowan into a blue artifact. Then you can now tap Rowan. So your next thing is 2 less, but it doesn't do anything that turn because you're already tapped out for Unctus. So then it's really the next turn where you could possibly have access to, assume you didn't miss a land drop, so you have your 5th land. Oh, I guess that's not true. You could cast something for 3 if you had something that was 1 colored mana and 2 colorless on the Unctus turn. Then the next turn is where you get real value, because then you could probably play 2 or 3 spells. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to make that work. I feel like that's better just being black-red with Rowan or doing something else with Unctus. Yeah, that's just a lot. That's a lot. I was like trying to figure out, like, does this thing really do anything? Like, does it do something? Yes. Will it do something consistently? That's the part I think I have an issue with. What do I think of green Twilight? It's medium at best. The problem with green Twilight is it just doesn't work the way people want it to work, I think, for the most part. You reveal the top X+1 cards of your library. So you spend, say, 4. You get to look at the top 4 cards, which is fine because you get to look at for all the mana. Then you choose a creature card and or a land card from among them, and you put those into your hand and the rest on the battlefield, or the rest into your library. And then if it's X is 5 or more, you can put the thing onto the battlefield. It just feels like a lot. It feels like a lot. I mean, we already have so many ways to ramp your deck, and if you do, now you could just use stuff like Bramble Familiar's ability, right? It costs 7, but like if I'm already spending 6 anyway, can I get to 7? You know? I think that's the issue. It's just like there's just other options already at 6 and 7 mana that you can do that basically do what Green's Sun's Twilight does. Right? Yeah, now Bramble Familiar. I mean, at 7 mana, it's easy for you to have another color, so you could even just Urtai, right? That's a thing. So, like, yeah, I think there's. Can it do a thing? Yes. Is it doing anything particularly well that you can't do better from other stuff? I don't really think so. I think there's a lot of reasons you don't really see this card. Let's see. Conquest not only doesn't target, it also sacrifices and effect. Oh yeah, it has a bunch of stuff. Let's see. I love Florian, Voldaren Scion, but I don't see anybody use it. Ooh, Florian. That's another good one. The thing about Florian is I think it doesn't get considered often unless you're already playing vampires. And I've been guilty of this myself when deck building. It's just like when I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to try a vampires build today, then Florian comes to mind, right? But if I'm doing, I don't know, just some black-red aggro thing, I don't really think about Florian that much. But it's actually not a bad card. I mean, at first strikes, it's a 3/3. I guess the thing with Florian tends to be the decks that are being, like, even right now, I have a few different Rakdos, aggro, sacrifice, one that's based on rolls. But like Florian doesn't really fit those other than just being a decent body. Right? But with the sacrifice deck, I'd rather be playing stuff like Obnixilis or whatever, probably, than playing Florian. Right? In the rolls deck, there's a bunch of other stuff that's either making tokens or making rolls that Florian's doing neither one of those things. So it's right, not really benefiting the rest of the deck. Other than, again, just being a quality body that I could potentially just maybe get to have some extra cards. But we've also entered a world, too, where there are a fair amount of tokens and chump blockers or whatever. So Florian just doesn't connect and let you get the cards all that often either. That's also part of the problem. And again, I don't think this card's bad. If my opponent played it against me, I wouldn't laugh at them or anything. I think the card would still be fine. I just don't know if it fits as many decks or strategies a lot of the times as people probably want it to. Oh man, y'all are coming deep with stuff now. Ajani Sleeper Agent. I think this one's fine. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it at fine. But I feel like you need a specific deck for this. Like something that has enough creatures that if I +1, I'm going to hit creatures. And really, I would like to get to the -6, but the times I played it, I almost never do. It's usually better just keep filling your hand, and usually, like, let me make my creatures bigger so I can keep attacking. But this one's fine. It's not particularly good or bad. It's just kind of middle of the road. I think it has the same issue some other things do right now of the decks that can get a lot of bodies tend to not want Ajani because a lot of those bodies are coming by way of things that aren't creatures, right? It's wedding announcements, three blind mice, wandering emperor, whatever. So it doesn't do any good to look at your top cards because you're just going to whiff too often. So then it's just like, do I want this just for the +1/+1s? Now, if you were playing one of the +1/+1 decks that's already playing a lot of creatures, then yeah, toss an Ajani in there, right? Because then the odds of you hitting a creature and keeping your stuff going is fairly high. And the +1/+1s will matter, especially when you're getting extra ones for everyone you're putting on. So yeah, I'd be into that if you want to do that. I wouldn't play a lot. I'd play one or two, but could be a good catch-up card if your opponent's going to be sweeping the board multiple times with sunfalls and whatever, like a way to make sure you get able to keep playing multiple creatures a turn. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that in those settings. I think it's fine. It's just not good enough that it goes into a pile of decks. But again, I think it's if you have the specific deck, it's a totally reasonable choice. What else do we got? Speaking of adventures, what do I think about Baluna Grand Squall? Is there no that feels like a commandery deck just because there's better adventures from the last set or the last trip to Eldraine. Probably, I mean, could you play it in standard? Sure, but realistically, that's probably something that's better for Brawl on Arena. I don't think Cultivator Colossus has appeared again in standard after the initial gimmick decks from its debut. Good question. I don't think it's going to. And I think because the things that made it work, I believe it rotated out before we got to this year's rotation. Could it still work in a world where now we have turtles and whatnot? Like playing Slowkirk to put lands back in my hand? Probably not. I think the problem is for 7 mana, again, once you start getting over 5 mana, the things you can do are just so good. And I don't think you can justify playing a Cultivator Colossus, right? You're spending all this mana to have, let's even say it's a 10/10 or something. It tramples, but it doesn't have haste, it doesn't have hexproof. It's like it's just a body, right? Or I could just play Tyrannix Rex. You know what I mean? Like it's like if I get a choice, one of these is just consistently going to be harder for my opponents to deal with. I don't know why I can't find the Tyrannix Rex in here. Oh, there it is. This is also for 7 mana, right? It can't be countered. It has trample. It has ward. It has haste. It has toxic for the same thing. So I would need the Cultivator Colossus to be significantly larger than 8. So you need it to be like 10 plus and hope your opponent doesn't have an easy way to kill it or counter it, right? Whereas this is just going to be more consistent more often for what it is, even if you're just reanimating it or doing any other silly trickery. By the way, I want to point out something because obviously y'all know the whole gimmick if you're regular on channel about King Darien Extra Large the 8th. That is a running bit that people love to get mad about in the comments. And since he's going to be in standard another year, I'm going to ride that pony another year. But that aside, I had somebody complain because I called this Tyrannix Rex and not Tyrannix Rex. And if I remember right, their comment was something like, well, would you call the things in Jurassic Park a Tyrannosaurus Rex? Is how they phonetically wrote it out. Because that's how you're supposed to say it. And I'm like, who says Tyrannosaurus Rex? Like, and I've literally asked like 50 people since I saw that comment. I'm like, hey, how do you say Tyrannosaurus Rex? Most of the people said just like that. Like, they didn't even say it. They just looked at me and went like, how else would you say it? And I'm like, I don't know. I thought everybody, now don't get me wrong. I am from the South and I will definitely mispronounce some stuff with regular dialects of the South or whatever. I got no problem with that. But Tyrannosaurus Rex, I assume we were all saying that the same way. Like, so y'all let me know if I'm wrong here. But I thought that was the way you say it. Like, I have never heard, even I don't even remember in Jurassic Park anybody saying Tyrannosaurus. Did they? And I just don't remember. And I've watched like, I don't know, like 5 Jurassic Park movies at this point. But like, I swear everybody says Tyrannosaurus. So I don't know what this person was talking about. I was so confused. Maybe I misread their comment or something, but it didn't make any sense to me. All right, let's see what else we got. Looks like Voice of the Blessed is your pet card. Yeah, Voice of the Blessed is fine. If you have it, obviously in a life gain heavy deck, it does what it's supposed to do. Are there any cards from Woad you would consider a sleeper? I don't know. There's a lot of good cards in the set. If you have a specific card you have a question about, go ahead and pose it and we'll talk about it. Isn't that word there based around tyranny? Well, that's also true, right? The word tyranny you don't pronounce tyranny, right? Like, even that makes sense. Like, I don't know. Like, call it T-Dog. Maybe we should. I would adopt that. If I put that in another deck, I'll have to remember to say that. That'd be even funnier. I pronounce it that way, but also it's spelled with 1 R and not 2. Sure. That's fine, but that still doesn't change how we're probably going to say it. Cards like the staff are just waiting for the other card to be related. Yeah, that's sometimes the case too, right? We do get cards that are close to being playable, but you're like, man, I need 1 or 2 more things that do X. And you're just hoping you get those within the next year so they're standard legal at the same time. Well, though now it can come in 2 years and still be standard legal at the same time. Prom says, dinner time, got to go catch the stream. Hey, thanks for stopping by. Much appreciated. By the way, if y'all haven't yet, remember to hit the like button because that helps out a lot. I know some of you, can't afford to be channel members and all that. Totally get it. But you can always hit the like button for free. Anything else you do, being a channel member, super thanks, whatever, are appreciated, not mandatory, obviously. But come on, you got to hit that like button. That don't cost nothing. I'm now questioning how I pronounce everything. Dude, Sleeveless, I'm telling you, like, and I'm not the only one. Like, creators all the time, we talk, and there's so many people that post comments being mad about how we each pronounce stuff. By the way, if you ever watch Saffron Olive, oh my God, like, Seth mispronounces a billion things more than I do. But that's just who he is. That's how he speaks or whatever. It's like totally fine. Like, my thing is this. If you know what the person is referencing, unless it's a true proper name of a real thing or something that's based on somebody's heritage or whatever that you should treat with proper reverence, does it really matter? You know what I mean? Like, it's that whole potato thing. If somebody says it differently, I don't care. Right? Like, I know what you're talking about. Like, it doesn't change anything. Now, again, if it's somebody's given name and it's important to their history or their culture or their heritage, totally understand correcting somebody and wanting it to be pronounced correctly. But we're talking about magic cards, man. Like, and Tyrannix Rex isn't even a proper name of a character in Magic. It's a completely made up monster. All right. Koth Fire Resistance. Is there still a good deck for him? Well, that's not so much what we're talking about. It's more about, can this be good or not? But Koth Fire Resistance, I think it's still fine. I think you can play this in a mono red type build still. I think you could even play red splashing something if you wanted to. Just obviously we need to be red heavy, so you still have enough mountains to go get. But remember that the triomes also count as mountains when you have them in play. You can only search for basic mountains, I believe, but they still count as mountains when they're in play. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, the new red Virtue. I was going to put Virtue of Red. I know that's not what it's called. Virtue of Courage. This actually, if you have Koth, now can be kind of interesting. Not particularly Koth, but like with Koth, you're using Koth to get rid of the creatures. And then whatever burn spells you get, you can send upstairs and get access to more cards. So I could see this being like an interesting piece, like these two cards going together in some kind of deck and being a problem for opponents. So yeah, this is something I could probably get behind. Totally something that's doable. A big red deck. Is the end good? People are already playing the end. That's there's not a lot to say about it. It's a decent removal card. It removes all copies of something. Yeah, it's a fine card. It's a quality removal card. That's kind of all there really is to say, unfortunately. I don't have a lot to elaborate on that one. Tameshi Reality Architect is my favorite card, I think, but I haven't found a great home. Oh, man. I don't even remember what Tameshi does. That's already a bad sign. I look at a lot of Magic cards every day. Oh, this card. Yeah, I forgot about this. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to your hand, draw a card. Return a land you control to its owner hand. Return target artifact or creature enchantment value from graveyard to the battlefield. I mean, the problem with this is just so convoluted. It reminds me of that other card from Kaldheim that was like each turn you could like exile some number of cards, and then when you flipped it, then you got the lands back into your hand or whatever. Like, is there value to be had on cards like this? Yes, but it has to come over several turns, and you have to have like, even with this, you have to have like artifacts in hand, and you have to have mana to spend to return something, and it's just, it just doesn't do anything. Like, put it in a commander deck that's blue based with a bunch of artifacts and stuff, maybe with Emery and some other cards. Well, now we're talking about we can do some things, but in standard, I guess the reality is when I look at this card, the first thing I would say is, what decks do you want this set of abilities against? And off the top of my head, I don't know if I could name one. Like, I don't want that against mono red. Any of the monocolor decks, right? I don't want to get against mono red, white, green, black, or blue. I don't want these abilities against any of those. And I'm guaranteed to play against, if I play for an hour in Best One Arena, I'm going to play at least 3 of those in some combination, right? So that's already, assume I can knock out 8 games in an hour. That's nearly half my matches where I don't even want these abilities, right? And then it's like, okay, do I want these against control decks? Probably not, because keeping Tameshi out and operable with mana up and everything else, probably not the most efficient thing. So like, maybe 1 or 2 weird mid-rangey decks, I might want it, but that's about it, you know? So it's like, I just don't see it where I'd ever play it. Like, this card is, it's one of those ones that I'm not upset it exists. I'm glad it's a rare, not a mythic. But it's the type of card I feel bad when people open it because they're just never going to play with it, right? Unless you build a very specific type of deck and you're in the particular type of meta game, this card's just never going to do anything. Like, so yeah, this one, just a big thumbs down for me. Like, it's so bad I literally shut it out of my mind, and then I reread it and went, oh yeah, there's a reason we don't play this. Like, it didn't take very much. Decadent Dragon's fine. There's really not much to say about it. It's a decent Magic card. Let's see. Talk to me about Invasion of Kaldheim. Is there any way to make the flip effects solid? ETB is pretty solid. All right, let's see. Invasion of Kaldheim. Man, y'all better be hitting that like button. We've gone through like 50 cards already so far today. Like, we are getting time in today. Let's see. When Invasion of Kaldheim enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your hand and then draw that many. All right. And then the backside is discard a land card, part of the roll tree, deals 2 damage to any target. Whenever you discard a land card, exile top card. I think the problem here is you have to have a setup that allows you. Well, first off, it's a 4 mana thing on the front with a 4, whatever we call that, loyalty shield, whatever. So that's already a issue because you have to have some situation where you still have some ways to get the 4 points off of this and have the 4 mana to get this into play. You're probably taking all of turn 4 just to play this, and you're hoping you have something to attack it or can get the stuff off next turn. But even then, what am I discarding to try to replace my hand with, right? Am I discarding spells to try to get lands? So when I flip it, I have lands to discard? You know what I mean? Like that's a gamble. Like you're having to try to set up your hand for the thing you hope you're about to get. And then that this lives. And we already know people are playing a lot of ways to get rid of enchantments because of the white removal and the green-white enchantment stacks, right? That's becoming more prevalent. So on top of that, you don't even know how many triggers you're going to get out of this. Which, by the way, did anybody notice there's a face in this thing? I've never even seen that in the art till right now. Looks like they're like, I don't know if I can mark over it on screen and y'all can see what I'm talking about. But it looks like there's a face, like there's a head, maybe like hair and eyes and like some type of beard or mouth or whatever. And then this is like the back of the head with like a tribal style feather or something sticking out. Like, I don't know what's going on here. It's probably just coincidental. There's probably, because it's like the tree, I think, is what's behind it, but it looks like a face. Like, I think this is just supposed to be the tree, like the trunk here at the bottom, and then those are just like the overhang of the leaves or whatever with some weird red stuff going on in the front. But it looks like a face. I don't know. That's all I'm saying. It's like when you look at the clouds and you see something. But yeah, I don't know. The other problem is this, right? Like you would get stuck in a situation where if your opponent got rid of it, you kind of got to get rid of all your lands right now. But then you have to play all those cards that turn. If they had the option, which might have made the card too good, to play until the end of your next end step or something, or then until the next step or end step of your next turn or whatever, that would make it a lot stronger. But as is, I think you have to, like, if this goes into a deck, it goes into one deck exactly. Like, I'm not going to say it's trash because I could see, like, if I squint real hard, I can see some ways that this could be used, but literally, it would be one deck and one deck only. I couldn't see myself doing more than that with it. All right, what else do we got going on here? Did we get through everything? Spark Rupture. Oh, Spark Rupture. That's the white card, right? I think I'm just gonna say it's just not good and save ourselves the time. Yeah, each Planeswalker with one or more loyalty counters on it loses an ability and as a creature with power and toughness equal to, like, my problem is I just don't know who wants this card, right? Even when I'm playing the Planeswalker decks, I rarely want this card because how often do you want to turn your Planeswalkers into creatures to kill your opponent? Like, it would be fine to play like a one of, and if you just get late in the game, you're like, great, I'm going to turn these 4 Planeswalkers into a 5/5, a 6/6, a 4/4, and a 4/4, and just attack you for lethal, right? But like, you haven't done any damage to them usually, except for maybe hit them with a token or two. But if you're already at the point that the tokens are attacking, just keep making opponent tokens and do what your Planeswalkers do. This card isn't going to really be that much better. Opposingly, if you play it in the other, you're playing it against Planeswalkers, well, you're possibly setting yourself up to die now because those things that were just going to sit there and make 1 or 2 tokens a turn now are just big bodies that maybe you still have removal in hand because you haven't had to use it on anything else, but you're playing white, so you're probably not even using removal that couldn't hit Planeswalkers anyway, right? You probably have the 2 mana one that can hit a creature or a Planeswalker. You probably have ossification, so you don't even need this really to deal with the Planeswalkers. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a use. I'm sure there's use, and I'm just an idiot. I'm just some random guy that makes YouTube videos. It's stupid sometimes, but I just, that's my issue here. Like, is it playable? Yes. I'm not going to say it's unplayable, but is it significant? Is it worth a slot in the decks you would probably put it in? And I say the answer is no, because I'm definitely not wasting sideboard slots on this. I would just play something that outright just kills the problematic Planeswalker. If I'm playing the Planeswalker decks, I also am not playing this main or sideboard. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to do. Actually, there's probably a rare circumstance where if the format for some reason was a lot of mid-rangey and control planeswalker-based decks. Well, no, because even then you're turning their stuff into planeswalkers. So never, or into creatures. So never mind. That doesn't even work. Yeah, this is just bad. I'm gonna just call it bad and move on. Stroke of Midnight. Will it see more play? Probably. I think Stroke of Midnight would have seen more play already if we had rotated standard. I think as long as we just, because you realize like in 3 years, we're going to have 3 years total for standard. We're going to have like your pick of removal because you usually get 1 or 2 reasonable pieces per set. Well, now we're going to be in a whole other year of that, right? So there's going to be a ton of choices. Likely won't get to see any significant play for a whole other year, maybe 2. But I could see a lot of decks where if you wanted to play some amount of removal, but you don't have room to play stuff to deal with artifacts and enchantments or deal with planeswalkers, you could just play like 3 of those and at least have some outs, and that's fine. 3 Blind Mice. It's just an okay card. I have it in a deck coming up in 2 days, but it's just a token maker. It's fine. Let's see. Rebuild the City. We actually had Rebuild the City in a deck. It was like the season right when the set came out, or I think we built the deck with it. And it's a fine card. I don't think it's particularly good or bad. I think if you wanted to play this with something that cared about tokens or copied tokens or whatever, I think that's totally reasonable. But yeah, it's just fine. I could also see this in a world where if for some reason, let's say control decks became a super big problem, this is a card you could play like late game. Okay, well, I got 3 3s. We get to attack with these, right? So now they have multiple things they have to deal with. So like that's an option. But yeah, it's a very corner case card. I don't think it's something you just play in any Jund deck, but it's at least playable. I wouldn't call it good, but at least it's playable. All right. What else do we got? Beluva is just a commander card to play it in Brawl. By invitation only, got sacrificed due to all the other board. But yeah, there's just tons of quality sweepers right now. I don't know what Teamer Adventure 4/4 Trample is. Threadbind Click. I don't know if I remember that off the top of my head. Oh, I did look at this the other day, actually, when I was building something with adventures. Destroy target tap creature. I don't like this one that much because the adventure side isn't particularly efficient for doing the thing it wants to do. You can just play better cards that can destroy anything. I mean, like we were just talking about, like Stroke of Midnight, right? You didn't have to be a creature. It doesn't have to be tapped. You can destroy whatever you want. The other side's fine. It's a 3/3 flyer for 4, which is okay. But not something I'm excited about. Like and obviously you're playing fairies, you're not playing white. So this almost has to be like, are you willing to play this in a Azorius Esper type deck? And it's not bad. I mean, it's still a removal card that you get an additional creature out of. So if somebody played 1 or 2 of them, I wouldn't like laugh at them and be like, why is this in the deck list? But I just think there's better, more versatile cards you probably play before that. Use Spark Rupture as a board counter against Planeswalker decks. Or you just die to their Planeswalkers. Yeah, I'm not playing Spark Rupture. Any ideas where Likeness Looter can do some work? I have a self-mill deck you'll probably see sometime next week. I'll leave it at that. Use as a filler for Lesmont enchantment stacks. One a deck, it can take care of them. Sticking to my lane. Thoughts on Tassiova? Are you saying Tatiova? Is Tasova a card too? Probably not. I think you meant Tatiova. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, is that a card I don't know about? Because there are a lot of magic cards. A lot of crazy stuff's been coming out. This one. This one's okay too. I toy with this card sometimes if I'm playing land heavy decks. Stuff with Slowker, now stuff with the turtle. It's like, yeah, this is fine. There's really not a lot to say about the card. Like it's pretty medium to bad on its own. But if all the parts around it work, it's not the worst thing. And because you have more creature lands now, you can give random lands flying, which is pretty good. So yeah, it has some uses. But it's a pretty underwhelming 3/3 until later in the game. I've been playing Commando Faces Kakazan for so long in Standard that I can't imagine a future without it. Well, that'll happen sometime, but not for a year. Let's see. Oh, and Jacob Hakkinen, I just don't think that's a good card. Whoa, that's not what I was looking for. I guess that's Jacob in a different language. Yeah, Jacob Hawken, Inspector, draw a card, exile a card from your hand face down. You can look at that card for as long as it remains exiled. You can pay 6. If you do, you transform it, and then it becomes an artifact. That at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. When you reveal it's the problem with these things, it's just too much setup. Like it's too much setup for too little return. Like it's an O2 to draw and exile a card. Like you still get access to it, which is nice. But again, what decks are you going to want these abilities against, right? Are you willing to spend 2 mana to play an O2 that has no impact until the next turn? And the only impact is getting to see another card because you're not flipping it forever. And I guess you're wanting to put a bunch of stuff into exile. So you're going to want to use this every turn. So you're not blocking anything. You're not killing anything. Yeah, this is just not good. Like it's just not what you're looking to do in Standard right now. This card is, there's a reason people don't play this, at least not in Standard. It's just not worth it. And now you don't get to flip it necessarily, but you can play what's her name? Starts with a R. But like there's a 2 mana 1/3 that you can draw and discard and then you untap if you play a legendary or whatever, right? Like that's just going to be better more often. It's a 1/3. It can block more things. You can actually kill some. It flips later, and then you have like a 5/5, which is cool. That does real stuff, which is just better than what Jacob's going to do for you. So yeah, this one doesn't make the cut for me. But all right, I think we got through everything. It took about 2 hours. That was a long run of cards. Yeah, Rona was the card I was thinking of. Thank you for that. There are a lot of cards that have Rona in the title. This is the one I was thinking of. Yeah, you can just draw and discard each turn. It's a 1/3, it's the same cost. And then on the backside, you get just a better thing than just like a thing that every turn you get one additional card. This can actually just help in the game with trample and can affect your opponent's hand. So yeah, and the activation technically is less because you can pay 5 and 2 life as opposed to having to pay 6 mana to flip Jacob, whereas this can flip for 1 less effectively. So yeah, this is just a better version of that. And it's rare instead of legendary, or mythic, which is kind of wild. Yeah. Oh man, that was a lot. But it just goes to show you there's still a ton of stuff to play with in Standard. There really is. And, we're going to have different opinions on cards. Some stuff is going to be better, worse. Some stuff fits different deck types than others. Some stuff is just waiting for the right situation to be playable or be better, right? That's going to happen with a lot of cards too. So not an uncommon situation at all. But yeah, if there's anything I can tell you, be sure to check out today's video. I have the deck list right here on screen over to the right there. It's a damn good deck, y'all. It's super fun, really strong. And like I said, I've seen versions of this starting to crush actual best of 3 tournaments. Really, really worth considering. If you haven't played it yet, let me post this. I believe that's the link we had from earlier. So if you want to check that out, to go see that deck. Let me double click it just to make sure it's the right one. It is the right one. All right. So yeah, checking out that. It's a Naya Adventures deck, which is super good. You should enjoy that. Also, if you haven't hit the like button, please do so now, because that'll help out so other people can get to see this and learn about all these different cards. Also, do y'all like these types of streams? That's a real question, because normally I think when people get on stream, they're like kind of looking for let's plays or deck lists, but like this is one we just talked about a lot of cards and help people try to understand why something is good or bad or why a card's not being played as much. Because really, when it comes to Magic content and gameplay content as a whole, really, I'd say as far as card games go, a lot of times the strategy stuff doesn't hit as well for people. So I tried to come up with something that was a little bit different, a little more interesting, where you could still learn about cards, but it's not me just saying like, well, in this combat, this creature should be doing this. And if you do this thing, like it wanted to not be so dry, I guess, is really was the goal. Stream has leveled up +1 content points. Well, thank you. Yeah, my thing is I want y'all to at least be able to take stuff away from this. When you watch any of my content, even if it's just learning about a card or an interaction or entertainment or history of something, I try to leave a little bit of something so y'all all getting something different out of the content, depending on where you're at in your situation and what you want. So in this video, I hope a lot of people learn a lot, because we talked about, I think seriously, we might have talked about 50 cards. I'm gonna have to go back and look, but there was a bunch. we covered a whole lot of them. But yeah, as always, if you want to super thanks or whatever, I'd appreciate it. If you want to become a channel member, I'm going to be working on a video this week, by the way, before I leave for Vegas. So if you are a level 2 channel member or higher, you will get that video. I'm also going to try to do one from Vegas as well. So if you are a channel member, there will be additional content this week. Well, in the next 10 days, like not necessarily just a week, but over the next 10 days, there will be 2 more pieces of content for you as a channel member. Also, I put up a questionnaire recently that went to channel members as well, so they get to help kind of decide what's going to be on the channel, and that's always pretty cool too. And if you ever want to send me a deck list, I have a membership level for that. That's you fill out a thing and it comes right to my email, so I can respond and help you out with the deck list on those too. Usually, you got to give me about a day or so, but I'll get back to you. But yeah, I will not be casting in Vegas. I will be casting in October for the Arena Championship 4. However, I will be in Vegas at the Arena Creator booth, I think is what they're calling it. And then I will be at a designated station as well. If people want to come by, say hi, I don't know, take pictures, have me sign stuff. Oh, if you see me in Vegas, I will be debuting I have some new, I guess they're roll tokens, if you want to call them, that are custom with like dragon art and stuff, which is really fun, really cute. You can come by and get some of those as well too if you're going to be there. After Vegas, I will have some pretty cheap for sale if you want them, and I can mail them out to you as well if you want some. So yeah, lots of stuff going on right now. There's a billion things happening. So yeah. Anyway, that's going to do it. I'm going to wrap this one up. I appreciate everybody for coming by. This was like an impromptu thing we set up like 3 hours ago. Awesome that y'all showed up. We had like 30 people through most of the stream, which is good considering it's a Saturday evening and people are probably watching Deion Sanders' team beat up on Colorado State or whatever right now. So yeah, as always, I appreciate it, y'all. I love you. Remember to be awesome wherever you are watching this. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. And most importantly, remember, be awesome to each other.